Welcome to the Shock Your Potential podcast, where we focus on creating positive, productive, and profitable workplaces. I am your host, Michael Sherlock. I am a leadership and sales expert, best known for being serious about business, despite what you may think by my appearance of often very colorful hair and sometimes crazy shoes. My guests bring a wealth of information that will support your career and your business, along with many pearls of wisdom to support balance in your personal and professional lives. Listen in as I have another amazing conversation with a guest who will certainly shock your potential. Joining me today is Michelle Wyatt. She's the author of, get the name of this book, Buckle Up, Buttercup, How to Drive Success by Embracing the Power of Change. And she is passionate about helping teams and individuals find success by learning to embrace, put your arms around that change, navigate through it. Yes, you can get through it and leverage it to your advantage. So by sharing the change management techniques that she's used herself to navigate through a huge career change, AKA she started out as a primary school teacher and then became a corporate trainer. So you can understand that she's navigated through a few things. Her goal, not only for herself and what she learned through the process, is to help others gain a deeper understanding of what makes change so scary to us and how to overcome those fears. So I am so excited to talk to you today, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to kind of kick off the new year and talk about change.
So first, I gave some of the highlights to your bio, but tell us a little bit about you, your business, and how you help people to shock their potential.
Sure. So I'm Michelle Wyatt, and in a former life, I was a primary school teacher. I taught first grade for 6 years here in Western Kentucky and just really did not enjoy it and wanted to initiate a big career change for myself. And through that process and making those kind of career changes, was kind of inspired, I guess you would say, to capture the things I learned. And eventually became a corporate trainer. I do corporate training for First Southern Bancorp, and then now an author of Buckle Up, Buttercup, How to Drive Success by Embracing the Power of Change. And what's funny is, you know very well that the book writing and publishing process takes some time. And so when I had my manuscript draft complete, it wasn't 2020 yet. We had no idea what was to come. And I've written a book about change. And when it was time to launch, it was right in the middle of the pandemic. And
good timing.
Yeah. And so I've had to put every strategy that I developed in thinking about career change and observing how others and teams deal with change and helping teams. I've gotten to help. We have a huge swath of industry that I've gotten to help navigate changes as we've gone through this. But it's really cool to see that those strategies have still held true and been effective during what is a year of just nothing but forced change after forced change after forced change that we're dealing with. And I know I just spoke to a women in banking conference, and myself, I have 2 boys who were in school and then weren't in school and then were in school and then weren't in school again. And, jobs, and my husband and I own a couple of small businesses together. So I've really had to put to test what I wrote in all these pages. Like, I've really had to put it to work this year and make sure that it was solid. And it's been really cool to see so much of it is centered around getting your mind right. And I think that's a big part of everything we do, but certainly facing any kind of change. So it's a little bit about
love it. We have actually a really similar background story. So I started out as an elementary school teacher. I taught for 1 year because it was just a temporary position for someone who was out on medical leave. And at the end of that year, they didn't have another position for me, and they were actually laying off teachers in my city because there weren't enough kids enrolling in school that year. And so I had to force a change, and I became the director of education in a credit counseling organizations. So I worked with banking and I worked with, credit unions and all very similar things. And I remember at first, because I also, when I looked back, I said, you know what? Despite what people told me when I was going to college about and telling them I was going to become a teacher, and they all said, are you sure? Like that pays no money. And it's not very, I mean, it can be rewarding, but there's not a lot of pats on the back. And they knew my personality. And then I got in there and I'm like, wow, you really make no money. Like seriously make no money. It's really hard. But I found that my skill set worked perfectly well for training and loved it and made that transition. But I would have never known. And I think that there's a lot of people, maybe they've lost their job. Maybe their job has been downsized. Maybe they're just tired of their job and they're not really sure they can leap into something else, which there's actually a lot of opportunity right now. Um, so I think there's people going, okay, how can I navigate this? What can I do? Can I take some steps forward? And if so, how? What would you do to encourage someone to embrace kind of a career change like you made?
Yeah, so I really I have actually had two teachers message me in the last little bit asking that very question. They're worried they have them, and I tell people all the time, I still teach, still what I
Mhm.
do and what
Yep.
I love. It's just a different setting, um, different constraints, a little more freedom and flexibility, right? And the first thing I tell people to do is just take time. We are so rushed and busy, and we pride on being super busy and productive, which is a good thing, but at the same time you really have to take time and figure out if that's really what you want. Is it
Mhm.
is it a bad career, or is it just a bad day? So is that really is that really what you want? And if so, you really have to start kind of. I talk in the book a lot about backwards mapping your choices, but you kind of got to know what got you where you didn't want to be to figure out
Mhm.
where you want to go and how to get there. And so just
Uh,
sort of looking at where did you not kind of follow your gut or follow your sort of internal compass, where did you sway, and kind of backwards mapping and getting back to a place of knowing yourself, knowing what it truly is that you want, and then you just got to put yourself on the path and go that direction.
how do you talk about that? That's really intriguing to me. How do you help people to backwards map?
Honestly, it's a lot of talking. Sometimes it's writing. We do a lot of I love a good brain dump. I actually have a whole section in my book over the process I call doing, because it's very easy, right? Everyone says just get started, just get started. But if you're one of those people that you can really build up an anxiety or a dread, that first
Mm.
step, that getting started, that's so much easier said than done. So I kind of wanted to bridge the gap between that. So it's I call it doing, but you dump your thoughts. You kind of get them all out. Every thought that you have, order them. Any kind of order that makes sense to you. It might be important, not important, you know, do it later, however you want to order it. A lot of thoughts and things that we're spending time circulating on it are nothing we can control or do anything about anyway. So kind of getting them out and ordering them lets you prioritize and lets you say goodbye to them, and
Mm.
take them
Mhm.
out of your mind. And then invest, determine how much time you have to invest, right? Because if you're going to make a change, you do have to invest substantial amount of time. I had 3 years where I was not actively employed. We did some, my husband and I started small businesses, but I had 3 years where I was not actively employed, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted and where I wanted to go. And then in doing, we say neutralize, neutralize your distractions. You do have to have some focus. So whatever your distraction is, most of the time, the first thing I hear is that I can't, I
Mm.
can't neutralize my kids. I can't. But then we get down to the nitty gritty, like cell phones, and you
Yeah.
can neutralize your attention to your cell phone. And then
Yeah.
the G for doing is go. And once you've kind of gotten through your thoughts, it really all starts with you're at mentally and your thoughts. And if you all those and come up with a plan, establish it, um, work with the time frame that you have, you'll be ready to go after you've done all that.
I like that. There's a lot of elements in there that I think everybody can relate to, and especially with the neutralized distractions, because there's a lot of times people are like, I can't, I can't, I can't, but it's like, and many times it's not because you can't, it's because you haven't. You haven't yet. You
Right.
haven't tried that yet. Maybe you've tried one thing like, oh, I tried to close the door, but the kids keep coming in. Okay. Did you put
Yeah.
a piece of red paper on the door that says, do not come in unless the house is on fire? No, I didn't do that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
did you tell people this is my time for writing or journaling or whatever, and give people boundaries? Because if we don't communicate what we need, then how can we expect it to magically appear?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in a day and age where we are so connected. We have a cell phone. I have on a Apple Watch. I mean, we're so connected, and we that is a choice. We do not have to stay that connected all the time. And if there's
Hmm.
something that is, a lot of people that I work with, social media is a real, not only a distraction but a deterrent for them
Hmm.
going after what they want. I talk a lot also about how comparing yourself to other people's journey um, can sometimes really derail you from your own. And social media is
Oh,
a real
yes.
trap when it comes to that, because you're seeing highlight reels. You're not
Ah,
seeing the
yes.
real. You're not seeing what it took to get there, or the sleepless nights or any of that. So when we talk about distractions and being connected, that's a big one.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, we really took a very different and unique approach with our social media this year for the business. And I've almost stopped posting anything personal, not
Yeah.
because I didn't want to, but because we've been so focused on what we've been doing on the business side. And I've gotten it down to where I do certain things at certain times of the day. And then other than that, I have none of them open. So none of them will distract me, because otherwise I could spend all day on it. And that's been really successful for me, but I hadn't done that before. I probably started that about 6 months ago, where, right, the first thing when I sit down, I check certain things to make sure they all went out okay. There's certain things I have to respond to, and like, oh yes, that me from
Right.
my personal account to the business account or whatever. And I do that before, the first phone call or the first, whatever I'm doing for the day. And then I have certain times, because I know also when things go out. So, we have
Mhm.
posts that are already scheduled. They go, the Instagram goes out at 10:30 in the morning. We got this going out then. And so I try and time it that way and then get it done and done. And so now
Yeah.
it's just a process. But I know there's a lot of people who do get distracted by that, and don't realize how much time that is taking up from them to maybe plan, strategize, or even just relax.
Yes. Yeah. Just connecting your brain and giving yourself the space and the time to think about if the choices you're making are really getting you where you want to go is
Mhm.
huge. That was probably the biggest thing when I ask people, how did, or when people ask me, how did you get there? How did you get to that point? I say I had to take time
Mm.
and get everything else out of the way. It sounds impossible when you
Mhm.
say that to a lot of folks, but when you really look at, I love, I don't know if you've heard of Laura Vanderkam. She's an author, but she does a
Mhm.
lot of study on time and how we use our time. And
Yep.
I love her books because at the base of everything, we have the same amount of time in the day as the most successful person in the world.
Yes.
And it's how you break it down. And a lot of people never look at. I love, though, on our iPhones it now has the feature that tells you how much screen, so it's like, you're just going to get shamed every time that pops up, and you're going to know
Yes.
you spent X amount of hours this week and on Instagram, and it's like, oh,
Oh, yes.
well, I guess I wasn't as busy as I thought I was.
And you're like, "I don't think Oprah does that, I'm pretty
Yeah, I don't
sure."
think.
In fact In fact, I read something recently about Oprah because I was referring to her in a presentation I was doing, and about who you look at and who you emulate, and what success you want to achieve. And I said, I'm
Sure.
always saying I'm gonna, I there's certain things about Oprah that I just absolutely love, and one is the fact that she didn't just wake up and become a billionaire. She interviewed a lot of incredibly talented and successful people. And then she learned from them. So I'm
Yes.
like, this is the greatest opportunity I have. But so I was like, I wonder what time she wakes up and all this. So I was searching it. And sure enough, there was a quote from some article she did in, some magazine somewhere. And she goes to bed every night about 10
Mhm.
o'clock and wakes up naturally around 6 with no alarm unless she has to be somewhere early. And that
Mhm.
every day around noon, she does her finances, like she pays her bills and all that because she doesn't trust anybody else to do it, which I thought was really interesting. And it made me think about, the
Yeah.
choices that we make, that we all make, the things that we still want to have control over because it makes us sleep better at night, but also the things that maybe we do that people, I just assume she woke up at 4 a.m. every morning, to, figure out how to make the
Right.
next $1 billion
Yeah.
deal. But it's nice to know that you don't have to kill yourself to have success. You just have to know what things
Yeah.
are important to you.
You do. That's it at the base of everything is just knowing what you want, um, kind of what gives you that fire, what gives you that drive, and then doing what you can to go after it. It might not happen tomorrow. It's a
Right.
long process, but it can be a good one if you let it.
I agree. So this whole month is about maintaining a flexibility of focus so that we can handle anything that comes at us. And I really think it's the greatest opportunity we have now from everything we learned last year, that you just never really know what's going to happen. So we better be able to plan some adaptability to change in there along the way. So what are your tips for my listeners and viewers to be able to navigate through this crazy new year?
I really think at the base of everything, it's learning how to sort of manage what you can manage, which at the end of the day is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Just feeling empowered that you can't control the weather, but you can control whether or not you bring an umbrella. You, you can't,
That
you
is
know,
true.
you've got complete control and mastery over how you react to things. And so often our own reactions, if we are, and we truly may be frustrated and annoyed. I tell people this all the time because people assume that I'm always happy and looking on the bright
Mm,
side. That's not the case. But I just refuse to let myself speak it, say it, put it out there over and over again because it never affects the result that you're
mm,
getting.
mhm.
It can, but it will do it negatively. You will get
I
an, if
agree.
you're speaking negatively, if you're poo-pooing everything, right, it's gonna turn to
Mhm.
poo. That's what you're gonna get. So
If you poo-poo, it's gonna turn to poo. I think that'll
gonna
be the
turn to
title of
poo.
this episode. No, it's
That's
so
it.
true. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and you have to have control over your own self, your own reactions. And just because everybody at the break room water cooler is fussing about a process change that's happened this year doesn't mean you have to. And when I talk in
Mhm.
the book about leveraging change, from a leadership standpoint, when you have changes that kind of come top down and maybe everybody wasn't in the loop on why, it is very frustrating.
Mhm.
But if you can have enough command over your emotions and yourself to be that person that chooses to embrace something, even if it's not right now comfortable, um,
Mhm.
you're leveraging that and you will stand out. You will stand
Yes.
out to those around you if you choose to embrace what you can.
I so agree. And as you were talking about that, it reminded me of a story. So the last two corporate positions I held, I was responsible for creating a lot of corporate change, massive amounts of corporate change, changes in processes, policies,
Mhm.
procedures, sales processes. It's very stressful on people, and I knew that, but we had to. We had to make the changes that had to be done, and there was a roadmap to success. So I was very confident that the outcome would be good. But it's always very stressful for people who maybe hadn't had that many policies or procedures, that they were required to follow. In many cases, we had business owners who had sold their business to the larger company and still were operating their individual businesses the way, they always had. So those were really stressful times. And I had a gentleman in particular, and if he's listening to this, he'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Actually, there's a couple of them. There's probably 3 or 4 people. They'll go, "That's me." But this one in particular, he was really, really frustrated by the changes, and in particular about a pricing change, because the pricing changes we were putting in place were vastly different than what he had been charging. And he was really fired up about it. And he kept coming at me with questions. And, and he's a very confident guy. So his initial approach could have been viewed as hostile, because he's, really direct. But I just knew there was something, the way he asked the questions, I knew there was a pain point in there. And I knew he didn't want it to happen, but he really wanted to understand why. And he wanted to know that if we did this, it would work. And one day he asked if we could have a call with another colleague. And because I knew she was struggling with it too. And I just said, okay, you guys ask me every question, yell at me, scream at me, tell me you think I'm wrong, whatever. But one way or the other, I'm going to get you there. And we probably spent, I don't know, 90 minutes on the phone. And there were some really heated moments. But in the end, I said, okay, what other questions do you guys have? And they're like, well, the only other question is, are you going to change this because we don't like it? And we know the answer is no. And I said, you're
Right.
correct. No, I'm not going to change it. But
Right.
I also want you to take a little bit of a leap of faith with me. And I'll tell you if what I tell you that I've experienced in this, doing this already across hundreds of businesses, if this doesn't work, if this really fails, I will let you guys operate differently.
Mhm.
But you need to commit to me right now that you will try it and you will support it to your team exactly the way I'm telling you to. And you give that at least 60 days. And I knew both of these people were really high moral people. I knew they would. I knew that if they gave me their word, they would follow. Now, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And they did. And it worked. And they were almost mad at me because it worked.
That
Like,
is how
darn
it
it.
goes.
That really,
Right.
but this gentleman and we remain really good friends now. And I value him so much that I go to him for advice. And he's constantly like checking in. And it's really intriguing to me that sometimes people, when things seem so frustrating for change, when you
Mhm.
talked about it as kind of unburdening or dumping your thoughts and putting them all out there, that a lot of people, I think they think they're doing that when they're ranting, but
Mhm.
their true process of dumping is doing it in a constructive way with someone that you trust that's going to help you sort through the trash and
Mhm.
figure out what in that trash heap are you really, really worried about and how do you maintain it. And that, I think, can get people through once they've cleared out the rest of the true trash and found the treasure within it, which is their pain point. Boy, that was a long
Yeah.
story. Sorry about that.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And one of the things I see most and the advice I give to leaders, when there is a change coming down the pipeline and, they see the end goal and they have that and they know the why. Communicating that and being open enough to communicate it out and then be the dumping ground
Hmm.
for people's concerns is so important. If you just roll it out, it's not going to be embraced. It's so much
Yep.
less likely to be initiated successfully if you just say, well, we're doing this and this is what we're doing. And you can do that.
Yep.
That's, and sometimes if it's particularly sticky or stubborn and you just got to rip the band-aid off and go, and it is what it is, that happens. Those changes exist. But for the most part, leaders in any organization have got to communicate clearly the why behind what's happening because they see the big picture, but they don't see the nitty gritty of how it affects this particular person on the front line, who it makes it much more difficult for them to give good service to their customers because of this
Hmm.
process change. And so they maybe didn't realize that. So opening those lines of communication, I love that you shared that story because it's so important.
And
Yeah.
that's, I think, where, just giving people the sense that this new year, yes, we flip the calendar, it's a new start, but it's up to us to carry the right umbrellas so that
Yeah.
whatever storm hits us, we're ready to go. And sometimes that means, building an emergency fund. Sometimes that means having, making sure that, you've gotten a correct certification so that if there's, things that you need for that job, you've got it. And I think that there are things we can control. We just
Yes.
need to remember that we have to sometimes work harder to control them.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving into the new year, just feeling empowered that you can control things that are yours to control. You
Yeah.
can't control everything around you. You can't control how people perceive you. You can't control whether or not, you know, certain things in business or the economy are fluctuating like you want them to, but you can control those things about how you've prepared, what you've done to set yourself up for success, and like you said, ride out whatever storm comes up.
I love it. Well, Michelle, I know we'll have all of your contact information on our show notes, including the links to your book. But in case anybody wants to look you up right now and find you, what's the best way for them to find you?
The best way to just find everything is to go to buckleupbuttercupthebook.com. All of my social channels are linked out there, but also on LinkedIn, it's LinkedIn/Michelle-Wyatt-author on
Oh, good.
LinkedIn. So that's a fun way to connect with everybody, and love sharing. I share some little tidbits out on LinkedIn every so often. So that's the best way.
Excellent. Thank you. Before we go, do you have any last words of wisdom or pearls of advice for my listeners and viewers?
I would just say keep on trying. Don't give up and take your umbrella.
I love it. Sounds great. I think that might be the name of your next book. Just saying. I come up with these things for people all the time.
There
I
you
need to have a
go.
cut of the royalties on that. Thank you, Michelle. It's been great having you as a guest today, and I'm so glad we're connected.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Shock Your Potential podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and like us today.